I stepped out of the restaurant's main dining room to take the call from my attorney. $85 million. The wire transfer was complete. After 40 years of building right logistics from a single delivery truck into a nationwide empire, I was officially a retired man. I was smiling as I walked back toward our table, ready to celebrate with my son Michael and his wife Sarah at the finest steakhouse in Dallas. That's when the bartender caught my eye. He was young, maybe 25, with nervous eyes that kept darting between me and our table. He stepped into my path, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, I need to tell you something. Your daughter-in-law. I saw her put something in your drink when you left. A powder. From a small vial." My blood ran cold. I looked past him to our table where Sarah sat, her red dress catching the candlelight, laughing at something Michael said. My scotch sat exactly where I'd left it, amber liquid gleaming in the crystal tumbler. I felt my hand shake as I pulled out my phone, turned on the camera, and handed the bartender a $100 bill. "Keep watching," I said. I walked back slowly, my mind racing through possibilities. This couldn't be real. Not Michael, not my son. But Sarah? I'd always felt something was off about her. The way she talked about money. The way she'd pushed Michael to ask about my will 3 times in the past month. The way her eyes lit up when I mentioned the sale. I reached our table and pretended to stumble, knocking over my water glass. In the confusion of Sarah jumping up, dabbing at her dress, calling for the waiter, I switched our glasses. My scotch went to her side. Her wine came to mine. 15 minutes later, Sarah's head dropped onto the table. But let me back up. Let me tell you how I got here, to this moment where I realized my own family wanted me dead. 3 months earlier, I had received the offer from Trans Global Shipping. $85 million for everything. The trucks, the warehouses, the contracts, the routes I'd spent 4 decades building. My wife Linda had died 2 years before, and without her, the business felt empty. She was always the one who reminded me why we worked so hard. For family. For Michael. For the grandchildren we'd hoped would come. Michael was our only child. We'd spoiled him, I knew that. Linda always said I was too soft on him. When he got arrested for a DUI at 23, I paid for the lawyer. When his startup failed at 29, I gave him $200,000 to get back on his feet. When he met Sarah at a charity gala 2 years ago, Linda pulled me aside. "Tom, I don't trust her," she whispered. "There's something in her eyes, like she's calculating." "Give her a chance," I'd said. Michael's happy. 6 months after Linda died, they were married. Small ceremony, just family. Sarah smiled through it all, but I noticed she kept checking her phone. During the reception, I overheard her on the phone in the hallway. "It'll take time," she was saying. "The old man's not going anywhere soon, but we need to position ourselves." I'd pushed the memory away, told myself I was being paranoid. Grief makes you suspicious of everyone. But after I announced the sale of the company, things changed. Michael called me every day. Suddenly, he cared about my health, my investments, my estate planning. Sarah would show up at my house with meals, always insisting I eat while they were there. She'd watch me with those calculating eyes, and I'd feel a chill run down my spine. "Dad, you need to update your will," Michael said one evening. "With this much money, you need proper estate planning. Sarah's friend is an estate lawyer. Very reasonable rates." "I have a lawyer, son. But this is different. This is generational wealth we're talking about. Sarah and we've been researching. There are trusts, offshore accounts, ways to protect assets from taxes." The way he said we made my stomach turn. When had Michael and Sarah become we in matters of my money? That's what brought us to tonight. Michael had insisted on celebrating at the Statesman, the most expensive restaurant in Dallas. $200 steaks, $1,000 bottles of wine. I agreed because I wanted to believe things were normal, that I was just a paranoid old man missing his wife. Now, watching Sarah's unconscious form slumped over the table, I knew Linda had been right. Michael was screaming. Someone called 911. "Sarah! Baby, can you hear me?" The restaurant erupted into chaos. The manager rushed over. Diners at nearby tables stood up. The bartender appeared with water, his eyes meeting mine for just a second. A slight nod. He'd seen everything. "What happened?" the manager demanded. "I don't know. Michael's voice cracked. She just collapsed. Sarah, wake up. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded on the table, watching my son, really watching him. His panic seemed genuine, but there was something else. When he reached for Sarah's purse, his movements were too quick, too purposeful. He was looking for something. Don't touch that, I said quietly. Michael's head snapped up. What? I said, don't touch her purse. Dad, she might have her medical information in there. Emergency contacts. Step away from it, Michael. Our eyes met across the table, across Sarah's unconscious body. Something passed between us. Recognition. Understanding. His face went pale. Dad? What? The paramedics arrived then, flooding through the restaurant with their equipment and urgency. They loaded Sarah onto a gurney, asking questions Michael stumbled over. The restaurant manager pulled me aside. Mr. Wright, I'm so sorry. Should we call someone for you? Call Detective James Morrison, I said, pulling out my phone. Dallas PD. Tell him Thomas Wright needs him at the Statesman immediately. Michael heard me. I watched his face crumble. Dad? Why are you calling the police? Because someone tried to poison me tonight, I said clearly, loudly enough that everyone nearby could hear. And I think you need to start talking, son. The restaurant went silent. All eyes turned to us. Michael's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Dad, I don't understand. Sarah collapsed. Not you. Because I switched our glasses, I said. After the bartender saw her put something in my drink, Michael's legs seemed to give out. He grabbed the table for support, his knuckles white. No, that's not. Sarah wouldn't. But his eyes told a different story. They weren't shocked. They were terrified. Not of the accusation, but of getting caught. Detective Morrison arrived 20 minutes later, just as the paramedics were loading Sarah into the ambulance. He was a solid man in his 50s, someone I'd met through business connections years ago. He listened to my story, took the bartender's statement, and then turned to Michael. Son, I need you to come with me. We need to talk. Am I under arrest? Not yet. But we need to have a conversation. I watched them drive away. Michael in the back of Morrison's unmarked car, his face pressed against the window looking back at me. I felt something break inside my chest. This was my son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the young man I'd sent to college, the person I'd built an empire to provide for. And he'd tried to kill me. The next 72 hours were a nightmare of police interviews, lab tests, and revelations that kept getting worse. Sarah had Rohypnol in her system, a date rape drug that causes unconsciousness. The same drug was found in residue in my scotch glass. The bartender, whose name was Carlos, had seen Sarah slip something from her purse into my drink. The restaurant's security cameras captured the motion, though not clearly enough to see the vial. But that was just the beginning. Detective Morrison called me to the station on the third day. Mr. Wright, we executed a search warrant on your son's house, he said, sliding a folder across the desk. What we found. I think you need to sit down. Inside were printouts. Emails between Michael and Sarah, going back 8 months. The first was dated 2 weeks before Linda's death. Once the old lady's gone, we'll have more room to maneuver, Sarah had written. He'll be vulnerable, grieving. That's when we make our move. My hands shook as I read. Morrison watched me with sad eyes. He'd known Linda too. He understood. The emails detailed everything. How they'd researched untraceable poisons. How they'd planned to make it look like a heart attack. How they'd already contacted lawyers to challenge any will that didn't favor Michael. How Sarah had been slowly isolating me from friends, suggesting they were after my money, that only family could be trusted. We found this too, Morrison said, pulling out another document. It was a life insurance policy, $5 million, taken out 3 months ago without my knowledge. Someone had forged my signature. That's identity theft and fraud on top of attempted murder, Morrison said. But there's more. He showed me bank statements. Michael had been embezzling from Wright Logistics for the past 2 years. Small amounts at first, then larger, nearly $500,000 total. He'd used his position as my son to access accounts, claiming he was helping me manage the business. He knew the sale was coming, I realized. He knew once due diligence happened, they'd find the missing money. That's why he needed you dead, Morrison confirmed. If you died before the sale closed, he'd inherit everything. The theft would never be discovered. He'd pay back what he stole from his inheritance, and no one would be the wiser. I sat back in the chair, the weight of it crushing down on me. My son wasn't just greedy. He was desperate. And desperate men do terrible things. Where is he now? County jail. Sarah's in the hospital under guard. She woke up yesterday, started talking immediately, trying to blame everything on Michael. Says he forced her into it, threatened her, all the usual deflections. But the emails tell a different story. She was the mastermind, I said quietly. Morrison nodded. We think so. Your son was the weak link, the one with access, but not the spine. She saw an opportunity and exploited it. I thought about Sarah. That first charity gala where they met, how she'd zeroed in on Michael within minutes, how quickly their relationship had progressed, how she'd isolated him from his old friends, his old life. She'd been hunting, and Michael was her prey. But I was the real target. What happens now? We charge them both. Attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, identity theft. The DA says with the evidence we have, we're looking at 20 years minimum, maybe more. 20 years. Michael would be 55 when he got out. If he got out, I'd probably be dead by then. And that thought, that terrible thought, was almost a relief. I wouldn't have to face what my son had become. Can I see him? Morrison hesitated. Are you sure that's a good idea? I need to look him in the eye. I need to understand. The meeting was arranged for the next day. They brought Michael into a small room, his hands cuffed in front of him, wearing an orange jumpsuit that seemed too big for his frame. He'd lost weight. His eyes were hollow. We sat across from each other at a metal table. A guard stood by the door. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Why? I finally asked. Just tell me why. Michael's eyes filled with tears. I was drowning, Dad. The debts, the failed businesses, the pressure. Sarah said she could fix everything. She had a plan. She said you'd never even know, that it would look natural. You wanted me dead for money? No. He slammed his hands on the table, making me flinch. I didn't want you dead. I just wanted. I needed. You needed what? His voice dropped to a whisper. I needed to be enough, to be successful, to be worthy of being your son. But I kept failing. Every business, every investment, everything I touched turned to garbage. And there you were, this legend, this self-made man, and I was just nothing. I stared at my son, seeing him clearly for the first time in years. He wasn't evil, he was weak. And weakness, given the right circumstances, the right person to exploit it, could become something monstrous. You were always enough, Michael, I said quietly. I never needed you to be me. I just needed you to be you. But I'm nothing. Tears ran down his face. I'm a failure. And Sarah, she saw that. She saw how pathetic I was, and she used it. She said she loved me, but she just wanted your money. And I was so desperate to believe someone could love me that I let her turn me into this. You had a choice, I said. At every step, you had a choice. And you chose this. Michael's head dropped. His shoulders shook with sobs. I know. God help me. I know. I stood up. Goodbye, Michael. Dad, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I walked to the door, then stopped. Without turning around, I said, Your mother was right about Sarah. She tried to warn me. I wish I'd listened. Mom. Michael's voice broke. Mom would be so ashamed. Yes, I agreed. She would. The trial took 6 months. Sarah pleaded not guilty, tried to blame everything on Michael, but the evidence was overwhelming. The emails were damning. Her fingerprints were on the vial. The life insurance policy had been her idea, her contact. Michael, on the other hand, took a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for testifying against Sarah. I attended every day of Sarah's trial. I wanted her to see me, to know that she hadn't won, that her careful plans, her manipulation, her poison had failed. The prosecutor was brilliant. He painted a picture of a predator who'd targeted a vulnerable family, who'd seen grief and weakness, and moved in for the kill. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Sarah got 25 years, no possibility of parole for 15. Michael got 12 years for his cooperation, with possibility of parole in 8. The day after the sentencing, I went to see Carlos, the bartender who'd saved my life. He was working the afternoon shift at the Statesman, polishing glasses behind the bar. "Mr. Wright," he said, his eyes widening. "I heard about the trial. I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry," I said. "You saved my life." "I never properly thanked you. I just did what anyone would do." "No. You did what you thought was right, even though it was scary, even though you could have looked away." I pulled out an envelope. "This is for you." Inside was a check for $500,000. Carlos stared at it, his hands shaking. "Mr. Wright, I can't. This is too much." "It's not nearly enough. But it comes with a condition. I want you to go back to school, get your degree, make something of yourself. Can you do that?" Tears ran down his face. "Yes, sir. I promise." I shook his hand. "Good. The world needs more people like you. People who see something wrong and speak up." I visited Michael once in prison, about a year after he was sentenced. He looked different, older, but clearer somehow. He'd been going to therapy, taking classes, working in the prison library. "I think about Mom every day," he told me. "About how disappointed she'd be. About how I threw away everything you both gave me." "Your mother loved you unconditionally," I said. "That never changed. Even at the end. Did you tell her? About the money I stole?" "No. She died believing you were struggling but trying. That's the gift you gave her. Don't waste it now." Michael nodded slowly. "What happens when I get out? If I get out?" "That depends on you. On who you become in here. The Michael who went to prison deserves to stay there. But if you become someone different, someone honest..." I paused. "Then we'll see. You don't deserve your forgiveness." "No," I agreed. "You don't. But maybe someday you'll earn it." I didn't tell him that I'd set up a trust fund, that if he genuinely reformed, if he proved himself over years of good behavior and honest living, there would be money waiting. Not the inheritance he'd tried to kill me for, but enough to start over, to build something real. But only if he earned it. As for me, I took the money from the sale and did what Linda and I always planned. I started a foundation to help families recovering from financial abuse and fraud. I funded scholarships for young people like Carlos, who showed character and courage. I made sure that the empire I'd built would do more good in the world than my son had tried to do harm. Some nights, I still wake up thinking about that moment in the restaurant. The weight of the glass in my hand, the choice to switch them, the knowledge that my own son wanted me dead. But then I remember Carlos's face when he warned me. I remember the prosecutor's passion for justice. I remember the jury's verdict, the strength of truth over lies. My son tried to poison me for money. But in the end, poison finds its way home. Sarah sits in a cell, her beauty and charm useless. Michael lives with the weight of his choices, the memory of his mother's love turned to ash by his actions. And I live, building something that matters, helping others avoid the pain my family caused. That's the thing about betrayal. It teaches you who you are when everything falls apart. And I learned that I'm Thomas Wright, not just a businessman or a father, but a man who believes in justice, in second chances for those who earn them, and in the power of doing what's right, even when it costs you everything. The bartender saw something wrong and spoke up. In the end, that simple act of courage saved more than just my life. It saved my soul from bitterness. Because now I know that for every Michael, every Sarah, there's a Carlos. Someone who chooses right over easy. Someone who stands up when they could walk away. That's the real inheritance I'm leaving behind. Not money, not a business empire, but the knowledge that good people still exist and they're worth fighting for.